Welcome back, everybody, to the Omni stage at Event Tech Live, USA and Canada 2021. And I'm delighted to say now that the Chief Executive Officer at TBX, Total Brand Experience, Margaret Lonsell-Penn, joins me now. Margaret, very good to have you aboard. Welcome to Event Tech Live.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's great to see you. Margaret's going to be talking today at 5 ways to jumpstart disruptive innovation. I'm sure there's loads of people going to be tuning into this one. It's been a key feature on the agenda prior to the show this year. So Margaret, over to you, and we'll see you a little bit later for questions from the audience.
Thanks so much. Hi, guys. So this is slightly better than having to see you all in person. Still a little bit nerve-wracking, but slightly better. So a little bit of background on me and why I want to talk to you about this topic is I've got nearly 30 years in event marketing and management. I've had an equal career on both the client and the agency sides of it, really blessed. It's been a great experience. I've produced events in more than 50 countries. And the really great thing about this past year is that I had 20 years of experience producing online events long before they were a have to have and were a nice to have. When the pandemic hit, as many of you are in the same situation, I was heading up an agency. We were getting ready to load in a big event for YPO in San Diego at the end of February. 2 days before we were loading in, they canceled on force majeure, rightfully so, but still a little bit scary. And, we found ourselves a couple of weeks later closing the agency. And, I had opportunity to think about what I wanted to do next, if I wanted to do anything. I had a long run, but I still had clients and projects and a lot of excitement and energy. And so decided that we'd push forward. So, since July 2020, we've produced 70 virtual events, which is pretty amazing for agencies and for associations, for technology companies, fashion companies, everything in between. And so my philosophy on COVID, as awful as it's been, is that it was a gift. And I use that, and I've heard other people say it, and I really believe strongly in it, is it forced people to think differently. It gave people like myself an opportunity to step back, take a look at their lives, decide what was uniquely important to them. Some people have left the industry or doing some incredible things. And also gives you an opportunity to think differently, which we don't often take the time to do. Personally, I did something that colleagues, friends, and families have been encouraging me to do for years, is go out and do it on my own. And I wouldn't have done that absent COVID. So I'm going to talk to you about disruptive innovation. And first of all, what the heck is it, right? So in business theory, disruptive innovation is an innovation that creates a new market and value network. Everything disrupts around it. It upends existing markets. It displaces established ways of doing things and firms, products, and alliances. So the concept of disruptive innovation is not a new one. It typically occurs when something major happens. So think about what we're doing right now, right? We're video streaming. So Netflix saw this as an opportunity to really disrupt the way people got content, movies, televisions, everything that they do is streaming. Think Uber, think Tesla. So those are what happens when disruptive innovation happens. So there's a new creative concept right now being implemented in large companies called design thinking, and it's being used by large companies like Google and IBM, and it's to reshape the way problems are solved and products are introduced into the market. It's at the root of implementing disruptive innovation. I won't go into detail here because you can research design thinking on your own, but it's really about approaching things from a different perspective. There's a story, a true story about a truck that got stuck at an overpass in New Jersey, and it created traffic for hours and hours. And they had engineers come in, and they had the highway patrol come in trying to figure out how do they get this truck that was stuck on the overpass. And so they had all these different theories, and a kid was driving by on a bike, and he just said to somebody, "Why don't you deflate the tires?" And that's exactly what they did. An hour later, the truck was pulled out of the overpass. And the reason that happened is because he was unencumbered. He had no predispositions about how things had to be done. He was just open-minded, and that's where you want to get when you're implementing or trying to implement disruptive innovation. So why should you care? So it's sort of like when Tom Hanks says, life is like a bowl of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. So you kind of need to be prepared for anything. So I think having a disruptive, innovative mindset is important because professionally, for me, I've been blessed. I've been doing something I love for a really long time. And when I look at the portfolio that I've done, it isn't about the projects or the experience necessarily, but it's about learning something new all the time. With COVID, here's where the COVID gift comes in again, right? So I'd lost my job. I couldn't hire anyone to build a website. I couldn't hire anyone to design a logo. I'd never done a sizzle reel. And so I got Canva. And I just did all of those things. And I was so excited about the opportunity to add something to my repertoire. And so that's where I think, you just got to like open your mind up and believe in yourself to do this kind of stuff. And when it's also too, it fueled my personal life too. I lost weight. I was exercising. I had a better work-life balance. I think, even though I was probably working harder than I had, more hours than I had done in years, but you don't often get the opportunity to reinvent and refresh. So this is the time. So if you take a look at the current state of the events industry, so revenue impact, the investment in events, it's not coming back soon. People are going to approach it differently, just the way Event Tech Live is doing this, is tapping into a larger, broader audience. Companies, hotels, hospitality companies that dominated the event management and production space, downsized by staggering percentages and they're now struggling to upsize again. Now that in-person events are coming back into the game, but completely changed the industry forever. The other piece of it is so much technology is being thrown at us. When we first started looking at virtual event platforms a year and a half ago, there were maybe a dozen, and out of that dozen, 5 of them would have merit. Now there's over 200. I have people on my team, it's their only job is to take a look and see what's out there and what we could be doing differently on behalf of clients. And most beautifully for a boutique or for entrepreneurs is that it's a level playing field. As a boutique agency, I now have entree to companies that would never have worked with us, who are now looking for fresh solutions and approaches. And because we're nimble and flexible and always thinking about new things, and we're not encumbered. There's that word again, right? So we can offer things that other people can't. So again, look at that for yourself, whether you're in a large company in a department or whether you're on your own or whether you have a small agency, there's opportunity out there despite what's happening in the events industry. So 5 strategies to implement immediately. And here's the good stuff. So when you want to get your team's creative juices flowing and come up with the next best thing to create positive change. So you want to adopt the innovator's DNA. And this was something that a gentleman by the name of Hal Gregerson, co-author of the Innovator's DNA, published in conjunction with the Harvard Business Review. And so I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that you can easily do. So first, challenge the status quo, right? So I won't read you the slide, but it's about questioning the unquestionable. So Peter Drucker says that finding the right question is more important than finding the right answer. Michael Dell has been known to say often that he likes asking the questions that other people don't think he's going to ask. And he acknowledges that it's a little bit cruel, but he kind of delights in coming up with questions that nobody has the answer to or has thought of quite yet. So it's a difference between being a manager and a leader. Managers improve what exists. Leaders create new ways of doing things. So throughout my career, the first time that whenever I hear this is the way we've always done it, I know it's time not necessarily to change it and shake things up, but to take a look at what you're doing or what we're doing and see if we're approaching it the way that we should or if we need to rejig it a bit. And, it's the exercise is important to a team, even if you're a team of one. So don't be afraid to ask why or why not. Be brave enough to ask the questions that it seems only you want answered. And, if there are constraints, bring them on. That's when breakthroughs happen. So it's important to get a variety of perspectives. I have, it's a millennial thing too. Like I have so many millennials on my team, 75% of them right now, and they ask more questions than you can possibly imagine. It's like a little kid. Why is the sky blue? Why are there clouds? But really the reason that they do that is they want to get things right and they want to affect the best possible outcome. So in our team meetings now, I build in 15 minutes at the end for questions. And I don't mind it a bit, because if my team's tethered to the why, they'll be better at the what. And in order for us to challenge our own assumptions, we need to think differently and ask those questions. So, how do we do this before? If we do this, what will happen? What are we missing? How can we benefit? So you need to take time to do that. The second piece of it is to observe like an anthropologist. So in a book called The Opposable Mind, a gentleman by the name of Roger Martin writes that innovative thinkers have the capacity to hold two diametrically opposed ideas in their heads. So it's a little like playing chess with yourself, right? You, both sides of yourself are pitting yourselves against each other, in order to win. So you're literally playing a game against yourself. But what comes out of that opposable mind exercise is typically something better than both sides. If you're a manager, your job is to lead projects and teams and take the but what you should do is really take the opportunity to step back from that. Whenever I've started as a leader in an organization, I roll up my sleeves, I observe, and I do first. I feel that I try to keep myself outside of that proverbial conference table and sort of look in on it. It's how you discover the talent on your team, new ways of doing things, new ideas. And because you're not sitting there trying to figure stuff out and contribute, you're open to those new ideas. That's how Quicken kind of captured their market. The founder of Quicken watched his wife month after month struggle with, the books and paying their bills and their monthly finances. And at the same time, he had a friend of his who introduced him to the Appaloosa before it was out on the market, a sneak peek. And he went straight to a diner and he sat down and he started writing down what his wife was going through, what the Appaloosa would allow people to do. And then he built up a graphical user interface to emulate things like a real checkbook and an Excel spreadsheet online. And in the first year of operation, they had 50% of the market for financial software. And it's really because he watched and listened. He had not had experience with any of that before. So observe, don't participate, learn and don't do, lean into your teams, and see both sides of things equally in order to challenge your own perceptions. Number 3, network outside your network. So the funny story. When I turned 40, I went through a major meltdown. My heart was palpitating. I had anxiety. I felt like I was getting old. I went to the doctor. I made him do like 4 EKGs. And finally he said, look, you are perfectly healthy. But what I think you need to do, there's 3 things, 2 things I did. 1 thing I didn't, for a little while. But the first was, he said, pick an age and stick to it. You want to be 39, you want to be 35, whatever you want to be, you just pick an age and stick to it. He said, secondly, don't hang out with anyone your own age or who thinks the way that you do. And that was like an incredible thing from a doctor telling me. The third thing is, he said he would give me a prescription for Prozac just to calm me down a little bit. And I took him up on all 3 of those things. But there's something called the Medici effect. So between the 13th and the 17th centuries, poets, philosophers, architects, painters, sculptors from all over Europe came together in Florence. They were paid for by the Medici family, who brought them in, fed them, wined them, dined them, put them up in whatever the hotels were then, and just to bring them together. It's almost like a conference or a trade show, right? Just to have different ideas shared. It's like the Davos of the 13th to 15th centuries. And they did it to deliberately create an intersection of ideas and backgrounds and networking. And what it did was it kicked off the Renaissance, which was the most innovative era in human history. And Florence was the epicenter of a creative explosion. So it all goes to say that networking outside of your sphere of influence is really important. It helps with your identity, helps you get jobs, collaborate, open your head up, look at things differently, and gives you inspiration. It's just fun, right? To do those kind of things is to step outside of what your comfort zone is. So network with diverse people to get new ideas. Don't just talk to event people, talk to others, and join groups in different fields. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a member of 40 groups, and half of them are not directly in my field of interest, but I learned so much and gained so much out of all of that creativity and exchange of ideas. And your network gives you better eyes. Next, experiment fast and small. So innovative entrepreneurs all engage in some form of active experimentation. So tinkering. Jeff Bezos used to take apart his crib when he was a toddler. And Steve Jobs, he would disassemble his Sony Walkman and then try to put it together. And so Howard Schultz, before he ever opened a Starbucks, he roamed Italy, north and south, going into little coffee shops and visiting them and seeing what was this conviviality, this experience where people just didn't grab a coffee and go, but actually sat around and it became a cultural thing. So Jeff Bezos, for instance, believes that experimentation is central to everything that you do. He actually encourages employees to go down blind alleys deliberately and experiment. Now, we don't all have the kind of money that he's got, but we can do that if we make it central to our approach and try new things and achieving innovation. So, and a mistake can unlock a breakthrough. So there's free trials that you can do. Like I said with Canva before, I'm like the Canva queen right now. I knew nothing about it. First, I had a free trial, and then I took a regular subscription. But in order to succeed, you have to be willing to experiment because you have to be willing to fail. I worked with a guy for a very long time that had a very successful shoe business. And I said, Larry, how did you get here? And he said, it's because I failed a dozen times or more. So the only way that he knew success was by understanding what failure was about and trying to create different shoes and shoe colors and shoe styles and going into different markets. And only until he failed at all of those things did he become successful in the one area of footwear, which was dyeable shoes, believe it or not. And that was his final success. So in your industry, which is so driven by tech now, there are so many simple things you can do. You test, try and learn, do free trials whenever you can. Think about the experience and the solutions from your customer's point of view, and don't lose sight of your vision. And I say this very deliberately because one of the things that we encountered when we were doing research into platforms for virtual events is we found that we were constrained by what the platform did. And it was really, really frustrating to us. And we found a couple of platforms, but that's not true right now, where you can sort of, the platforms themselves are platform agnostic, which enables us to let the vision drive the way. So if your vision drives the way and then you experiment on top of it, you'll come up with really great breakthroughs. It's really easy to spend a lot of money. You don't have to do it to experiment fast and small. And then the last piece is connecting things that are typically disconnected. So, and this is a story I want to tell you. So Leonardo da Vinci, if you're familiar with his art, he's got this series of caricatures of, very odd shaped faces. And the way that he did that was he would create a grid and he would list by head shape, by forehead size, by size and shape of nose, size and shape of lips, and size and shape of ears. And he would just sort of almost like close his eyes and pick, okay, big forehead, large nose, little lips, small ears. And he would create these caricatures. And this is a true example of connecting things that are typically disconnected. And beauty comes out of that when that happens. It leads to new ideas. Then you have Peter Fisk talks about Albert Einstein, and he was always challenged because he would make these really absurd connections like mass and energy, right? But you have to be, there's no existing logic that exists on that, but it needed to be shaped through imagination. And almost every great breakthrough, scientific or otherwise, comes through the hypotheses of, and then making sense through practical demonstration. And so when it comes to this connecting things that are typically disconnected, Richard Branson has an equation for life and success. A plus B plus C plus D. And it stands for always be connecting the dots. So at our weekly team meetings, right, I stole this from my boss at Patel. It's not new, but one person is tasked with sharing a quote of the week, and somebody else is tasked with sharing a video. And we require that they deliberately be outside of the industry and out of the regular stuff. Is we want what makes them laugh, what makes them smile, what inspires them. And it's not those success, things that you see on YouTube. This is just real stuff. Sometimes it's a commercial. And then we take 10 minutes and we talk about, as a team, about what this stuff means to us personally and professionally, and what can we glean out of it that we can layer on top of business things that we're doing. So, free association, brainstorming, there's some great tools out there that you can research to do that with. Sharing things that inspire, social media posts and all of that, challenge your own perceptions regularly, and practice that Medici effect, which is bringing people together of different ideas. And so those are the 5 things. And I know I went through it kind of fast, but here's some resources for you guys. So find anything you can on design thinking. It's out there. It's really incredible. And there's, really easy ways to do this. Read The Innovator's DNA. You can get it through the Harvard Business Review, which goes into a lot more detail than I have here. There's an app called the Creative Think, and it was developed by a guy. His name was Roger Von Eck, and he developed the Creative Whack Pack years ago, that was just challenge people in meetings on how to think differently and jumpstart creative ideas. Spring for something like Masterclass. I gave this gift to myself. I'm taking singing lessons and cooking lessons and doing things that are so outside of my regular skill set and comfort zone, but are just opening my ideas to possibilities. And attend more events like Event Tech Live or even outside of the industry, just to to open your head up, to do things more innovatively and jumpstart your own innovative disruption. So I would be happy to share. You can see there's a branding here. We have a new agency brand called popexperiential.com. We have our own creative think card deck that we use, and we've developed. Happy to send it if you email it to me. Note the experiential without an E. And I can send you a copy of this deck. I can send you some other resources. But I hope you have fun. And I've really appreciated being here. I think we're going to get some questions. I'm going to take a look at the chat and hear you back. Hi.
Hello, Margaret. Thank you very much. I've been listening intently. I've loved that session. I've loved some of the points that you've made there. I've been following your slides on my screen here as well as you've been advancing them. Just have a little look at them in a bit more detail. And there's a few points that have come in and that I'd also like to pick up on if you've got a few minutes to go through some things that you've said. One thing that was quite personal to me and that I realized during that is something I've said to my own children in the last few years is that with their smartphones that they carry around with them every day, I always say to them, you have access to every piece of information known to your man in your pocket, and yet you choose to sort of always look at the same thing. And it's really important sometimes, isn't it? Not just in business and not just in events, but in life, to sort of break out of some of those linear habits and go and explore other opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And again, and you take a kid, right, who's totally open, and then you take somebody like myself with all these, even more habitual things. You really have to very deliberately step outside of that and do things differently. I don't think I'd have done half of what I've done in the past year if we hadn't been upended in March 2020. I was sort of forced to do it. And again, I thought to myself, do I just have a great career and, watch from afar? Or do I get involved in it again? And just sort of broke it all apart. And it's been great and a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And on that note, something that you picked up on, and I heard you pause ever so slightly when you said it, and I totally understand why, is COVID being a gift? Because of course it's been, a horrible period of time and a lot of people have gone through, horrible things as a result of it. But when we do look at it in a slightly different light, I would be inclined to say that most people would agree with you. It forced people to change very, very quickly. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that COVID showed that if we want to and if we're forced to, we can adapt very, very quickly. Sometimes it's our own stubbornness not to adapt and not to look at new ideas. And suddenly when we were all pushed off the cliff, so to speak, we had to quickly adapt, and we showed that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I know so many courageous people, and some of them haven't stayed in the industry, doing real estate or following, traveling and whatever. I think that, there's two ways to look at it. You can let it frighten you. And I think that to a large degree, the events industry. I mean, I'm on these various committees and advisory groups, and the large trade show organizations, they were really fighting it for a long time because it was scary. But I think that, again, with those kind of things, you can approach it one way or another. You can either embrace it or you can fight it. And I think when you embrace it, that's where the great stuff happens.
Because of the speed at which people had to adapt, do you think that any sort of complacency amongst large organizations, large event organizations, perhaps presents an opportunity for smaller, more nimble organizations and freelancers to actually explore these new virtual opportunities?
No doubt. There's a couple of things. So for us, being a small agency, we're doing some projects for Dell, for instance, and for BMC. They never would have talked to us, right? Because they have these forever relationships with these very large organizations. And then those large organizations had to downsize so dramatically that the people that they had worked with were gone. They never would have talked to us. It opened up a huge vista of opportunity for us. And I think that, you got to feel confident in yourself too. So, we went out there and said, we're strong and we're tough and we're lean and we're mean and we're nimble and we're cost efficient and we're approachable and all of those things. So I think for sure it opened up a vista of opportunity, or it can open a vista of opportunity. And I do think that the larger organizations were not quite ready for it and couldn't pivot as quickly as small organizations or entrepreneurs can. Yes, pivot. There you go.
And I hold that up, and I'll use my sailing analogy as well, because it's like turning a cruise liner and turning a kayak, isn't it? When everybody was forced to pivot, the kayak can turn quickly because it's a much smaller much smaller boat.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that just
with a kayak.
Before we wrap things up, Margaret, one of the key slides in there was networking outside of your network. If somebody said, I can't even begin how to think about that, would you say, look, here's some sort of 3 key bits of information or bits of guidance that you would say if somebody was looking to network outside of their network and how they would approach that? Platforms that they can go on, ideas, places to get inspiration from.
Right. So I think, for me, and it's not so much networking, but it's new information. It's like masterclass, like I said, right? It's like, that is just, it opens up your head and gives you an opportunity to see other things that you're interested in, which then can lead to networking with other groups. So LinkedIn to me is a critical tool for this. I always just go down and take a look at all of the groups that are on LinkedIn. So I have some fine arts groups that I'm a part of. I've got, some advertising agency groups that I'm a part of. Some of it's events, some of it are just like executive think tanks. So I think LinkedIn is great. And I also, too, meetups are great. Like just to go to meetup.com and see what's out there, because I think that, I think particularly, too, since we've all been home, so our personal and our professional lives are so intermingled. I think that, if you take a look at like Facebook groups or meetup groups and find things that fuel your passion, if it fuels your passion personally, it's definitely going to have some impact on the way that you approach things professionally, sort of how I feel. So I would say Meetup, LinkedIn, a little bit of Facebook, and just take a class in something that you're just terrible at.
Fantastic. Margaret, thank you so much for joining Event Tech Live today. It's been great to have you here. It's been great to see your session. Anybody watching this who would like to connect and extend this conversation, this discussion a little bit further with Margaret, you can do so via the event platform. Just search for Margaret in there and you can send a connection to her. Margaret can reciprocate that, hopefully, and get everybody talking together. Margaret Lonsdale-Penn from TBX, Total Brand Experience, thank you very much for joining Event Tech Live today, and we'll see you back on the Omni stage very shortly.
Thanks. Honor and pleasure. Bye-bye.